Joining us now is Pratap Chatterjee, who's an investigative journalist and author of the book Halliburtons Army, How a Well-Connected Texas Oil Company Revolutionized the Way That America Makes War. Mr. Chatterjee, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
How did this military contracting business become so big so fast? Where did these guys come from?
Well, Halliburton is from Texas, and KBR is also from Texas. These are companies that are, started in the 1920s. And lest it be forgotten, they've actually been involved in the business of war for many years. In fact, Halliburton, which owned KBR for the last 40 years, actually built ships. KBR, Brown & Root built ships in the Second World War. There's a company called Brown Ship. And in the Vietnam War, they built most of the bases in the country. They built the military base in Diego Garcia, and lest to be forgotten, in the Clinton administration, Halliburton and KBR, Brown & Root at the time, built the bases in Bosnia and Kosovo. So it's been many years since they've been joined at the hip. However, things have changed today, because whereas in the first Gulf War, only 1 in 20 people on the ground was a contractor, today for every soldier on the ground in Iraq, there is a contractor. So 160,000 troops, 175,000 contractors, and 50,000 of them come from Halliburton or KBR. 40,000 of them are actually from third world countries such as India or Sri Lanka.
One of the issues that I think is really underreported about contractors is the fact that so many of their employees are from other countries. They're not necessarily American countries. They are from the rest of the world. Are they bad companies to work for?
Well, Halliburton or KBR, which is the company that now holds the country, you have to understand that Halliburton and KBR split up. They got divorced, and so now KBR is the company in Houston that does the work. They pay Indian workers who clean toilets and that sort of thing $300 a month, which doesn't sound like a lot of money. In India, however, if you do the same work, you get a lot less. So a lot of people go to work for these companies because they pay more than you'd get in their home country. To hire an American, they start at about $80,000. So if you drive a truck and you're from Alabama or Texas, you're going to get a lot more, 2 or 3 times more than you get in the U.S. So it's very attractive. And to this day, people call me up saying, how can I get a job in Iraq?
But are you saying, though, that for the same job, Halliburton would pay radically different pay scales for the same job to people based on what their nationality is?
Absolutely. For exactly the same job, a truck driver, there's a guy in my book by the name of Titoko Savuwati. He gets paid $170 to drive ice cream, chocolate-covered bunnies, steak from Kuwait to Iraq and back. $170 for a round trip. On the other hand, an American who works for the company would be paid $5,000. Now, I'm not saying that the Americans are doing very well. A lot of them, in fact, get into a lot of trouble. They come under fire. Some of them get killed. Some of them get injured. So it is not necessarily better for an American, but the very same job, very different wages. Between $1,000 for a Fijian or $500 for a Sri Lankan, and again, it depends on your nationality, and $5,000 for an American. It is based entirely on where you were born and the kind of passport that you carry.
It seems to me like an incredible weakness, a sort of brittleness in our national security, that we, for example, say that we can't protect our own diplomats anymore without hiring private companies, that we can't operate our own supply lines. Is that dependence that the Pentagon and the State Department and the rest of the government now admit to, is that reversible?
It isn't really. And Napoleon once said, an army marches forward on its stomach. Well, that stomach is fed by Indian workers, Sri Lankan workers, Filipino workers. And today, if Obama were to say, okay, that's it, we're going to fire Halliburton and KBR and kick them out of the country, that army would no longer be able to march. We are entirely dependent on contractors to be able to get us to Iraq. If he were to say, tomorrow we don't want any more, we want to leave Iraq, well, those supplies, to bring them back, those containerized kitchens, those F-18Es, they have to be brought back by contractors. They were shipped there by contractors.
But the reason I'm confused, though, is that we didn't always use contractors for this much of what we did, even though contractors have been around for that long. So presumably, it feels irreversible to do it in the short term, but we could scale down to what we'd had before, couldn't we?
Well, there's a difference between now and, let's say, Vietnam. In Vietnam, we had a draft army. And here's the key difference. When you have a draft army, you can tell people, you've got to go to Iraq or, in the case, Vietnam, peel potatoes, drive trucks. Today, because we have a volunteer army and we're trying to save costs, we need to turn to third world workers from India to come and do that in order to be able to save save money. It's actually in some ways become very easy because a soldier now goes to Iraq and is fed, by an Indian worker. He presses a button or she presses a button and drops a bomb in Yemen or Pakistan. So we now can continue shopping, or we can drop bombs and not think about it because war has been completely privatized and outsourced. American soldiers probably still shoot guns in an actual battle, but a lot of times that work is the stuff that's dull, dirty, and dangerous is done by Indian workers or by robots in the sky.
Well, some of what's dangerous, certainly being out there as an infantryman is pretty dangerous.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I would not disagree with that.
Pratap Chatterjee, author of the book Halliburtons Army, thanks for coming on the show tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
Coming up on the show, we will be joined by Alexandra Pelosi, who is